Hey everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the Plebe Summer terminology series here on the Academy Insider podcast. I'm joined again by Ricky and Troy. So if you enjoyed the last episode, you're gonna love this one. I'm telling you, we're just continuing on with the Plebe Summer terminology. You're gonna continue to get that insight and feel like you understand what's going on at the Academy, the terminology that's being used, and you're gonna understand stories that your son or daughter is telling you. I hope you love it. If you do, again, please like, subscribe, share, leave a review. Doing all those things tremendously helps the podcast and the channel. So if you can do that, that would mean the world to me. If you ever have any questions, shoot them my way. I'd love to answer them and be that resource for you. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the episode. The Academy Insider podcast is sponsored by the Vermeer Group, a residential real estate company that serves the United States Naval Academy community and other select clientele in both California and Texas. If I can ever answer a real estate related question for you or connect you with a trusted Academy affiliated agent in the market which you're in, please reach out to me directly at grant@thevermeergroup.com. You can also reach out to me on my LinkedIn page, Grant Vermeer, and I'd be happy to respond to you there. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to the episode. All right, hey everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the Plebe Summer terminology series. Back with Troy and Ricky Conlon. We're gonna save the intros for this one. If you don't know these two knuckleheads by now, I would recommend we go back and listen to episode number 1 here, because you should anyway. It's pretty good. But we're gonna jump right back into terminology. So to start off in episode 1 of this series, we talked about things that kind of just happen in the hallway. Alpha codes, chopping, what a bulkhead is, keeping your eyes in the boat, bearing, all these different aspects. I want to start this episode with a little bit more on the topic of remediation, right? And so, some of the funniest stories come from remediating when you do things wrong as a plebe. And so following up on bearing, I want to follow up on this term. And Troy, did your detailers ever make you brace up? And if you do know what it is, you mind talking to the people about what it means to brace up?
So I can honestly say I never had to brace up. Yeah, I never had to brace up. That was something that I did not experience. I saw it on the list. I was like, I don't remember what that is. So I'm going to have to pass that to you.
All right, Ricky, you were laughing. Do you remember what this is?
Oh, bracing was like a big part of the plebe experience. And if I remember right, there was like some sort of like technique or cadence that went with it. And I have just like evaporated that from my mind entirely. But it involved like you put your head out, you put your chin down, and then you're like pull back in to make like triple chins.
Oh my God.
And you basically like stand like that and have to run around like that. And like we would have to do it at meals. We would have to.
I'm actually embarrassed that I didn't remember that. That is hilarious.
Yeah, and it hurt and you get your neck sore and whatnot. But most especially, you just looked really stupid doing it. And I hated doing it. I hated bracing as a plebe. So I remember that very
That is funny. Oh my God, I completely forgot.
Yeah, because it hurts, like your jaw and neck after a while, like it starts to get like you're just you can't move. I mean, that's kind of the whole point though, right? So from an actual purpose of like bracing up, if you have no bearing, if your eyes are out of the boat constantly, you're turning around, you're looking all over the place, when your neck's tucked like this,
you have no choice. You have no choice.
You can't look anywhere else. Like that's it. You're stuck like that. And
the phrase was get a brace. They said get a brace, and there was some magical term, and you were locked into it. That's how it was.
And I'm actually a quick interjection for one small term here, which is that cadence that you're talking about. Like when you're like, all right, there's a magical cadence to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. I'm bringing up this term ditty. Troy, can you tell us what a ditty is?
Oh yeah.
What is a ditty?
When you go in the drill, they give you these very, stochastic phrases that you always remember. And if you get those phrases out of line, the whole purpose is to take out the randomness of doing an action. So you have one step that has an associated ditty. Second step has an associated ditty, or something that you say out loud, so that the action also has, some vocal phrase that you immediately associate with execution.
Yep. 100%. So that was part of the getting braced up, is following a ditty, which again are just these vocal commands to help you in coordination with a specific movement, which is very specific to drill. We'll do a whole episode on drill, so we won't waste too much time here. But my favorite brace story, Rick, this is so funny because my detailers, I had a very like Marine Corps centric detailer crew, right? Like they weren't playing around. They weren't messing during Plebe Summer. And if you weren't bracing correctly, like they would tell you to get a brace, brace up, whatever the case was. And if your brace wasn't good enough, they would literally make you walk around. Like we had plebes, I had to spend like a week carrying like a Caesar salad packet underneath my chin. Like they're like, you are only bracing correctly. Like you are only bracing correctly if that like salad dressing packet doesn't fall off your chin. So you have to put this
That
little
is
salad
funny.
dressing packet and go and hold
Who
that
thinks
sucker
about these
in there,
things? Like,
dude.
somebody like thought about that. Somebody was like sitting in bed at night and thinking, you know what really determines a brace is when you can hold a touch puck in bed. Like, who does that? What is that?
The long nights of preparation
The
as a Plebe Summer
detailers of
detailer.
26 company, baby. That's who.
Right.
That's next level. Yeah, that's something.
Oh, good
man.
stuff. All right. One more remediation story that I want to tell. We're just gonna follow this, like when we're talking about remediation, these are things that like detailers do as creative. They're funny now, creative things to like remediate something that you're technically not doing well. And so I have a specific story where, again, even to today, I don't grow enough facial hair to shave every day, right? Like I just don't. And so during plebe summer, especially in like my pre-pubescent years, I'm 18, I barely shave. Like I would like shave, but I didn't fully grow anything. So like there was times where like I just wouldn't shave because like there was no hair there. I had a detailer come up to me one day in an inspection. Jericho Ermanita, I love this guy. To this day, I ran into him in San Diego like literally a couple months ago. Hilarious dude. But he walked up because he was short. Like I love my guy. He's a little shorter. So he's all up in my grill. Like I'm head here. He's looking up at me and he's like, he looks at me and he's like, midshipman fourth class from here. Did you shave this morning? And you know what I mean? And like when you're a plebe, you can't lie. Like I don't, you know what I mean? I was like,
Nope.
sir, no, sir, blah, blah, blah. And so literally, because I didn't shave, every plebe, including the women, had to bring a razor out every morning. We would bring out a razor, like after you would wake up and get dressed and like come out to the bulkhead for the first time, we would have to bring our razors with us. And then they would go and they would say, all right, you have 30 seconds to go wet your face and apply shaving cream. Ready, go. And like everyone would run back in and like do it and come back out of the hallway. And then they would go, and then they would make us, we literally like, it was as if we were doing rifle drill. They were like, present razor. And as soon as they said it, you would have to stick your razor out to the front and hold your razor out. And then they would give another command for you to actually shave. And for the women, they're just like, fake shave. Just don't touch your face, but like fake it. Like, dude, like
Ooh,
I was
man.
just like, oh my God, dude.
Oh.
And so to this day, like I always like laugh. He was just like, present razor. And you just have to go and like, because of me, every single person in our company in the mornings, we lost out an additional 30 seconds because we'd have to go and bring our razor out to the front.
That is golden. That is golden.
The stuff people
Classic
think
stuff,
of, man.
I'm glad
Good
you
stuff.
still shave to this day.
Hey, that's
No
because
trauma there.
that's because my facial hair just is so unattractive. I like my hair doesn't get like thicker; it just gets like wispy and longer. It's gross.
That is
I'm
funny.
actually a child.
It actually took me a long time to grow a beard too. For those listening on the podcast, I typically look like a pirate in my post-Navy days. But the sad part about when you do get old enough to grow a beard, if you have the boyish looks I had as a youngster, you also grow hair in other places. So I can grow a beard, but I have hair growing everywhere. So, blessing and a curse.
Blessing and a curse. All right. I'm going to turn it over to you. If you guys have any like funny remediation stories, things that happened that you remember, I'd love to hear them now. If not, we can move on, but I figure I'll give it an open floor here if you got something you remember.
Troy, you got anything?
We talked about the bearing bear last time. The bearing bear was probably the one that got me the most, frankly.
Yeah.
Between the bearing bear and getting dropped, I mean, those were the two that took up most of my plebe summer.
I guess the only thing that I would say is I had plenty of remediation, and it usually came in the form of getting dropped. But I'd also mention outside of plebe summer, plebedom and plebe summer like is used as almost a Rosetta Stone for maximum military stress in the Naval Academy world.
Yeah.
And so I remember during plebe year, during the academic year, if the company of plebes was not performing well or they messed something up, you would get the back to basics week. And back to basics basically meant we're going back to Plebe Summer. When I think about remediation in Plebe Summer, I just think about the fact that Plebe Summer itself is used as remediation during the academic year. I remember that happening 2 or 3 times where they just, would go back to some ridiculous rule that we had to deal with in Plebe Summer.
And you just absolutely loathe going back to the chaos of Plebe Summer, especially while you're managing, chemistry, calculus, all the different academic. Oh man,
horrible. Being a plebe is not by any stretch the worst or hardest thing that you'll do in the military, but it's definitely not fun, and it's definitely annoying. And when you're 18, it's about the last thing that you want to be doing. And so I've done worse, and my remediations have been harsher in life. But man, at that time, getting that taste of humble pie, woo, does that taste distinctly familiar?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, let's get back to a couple actual terminology. Let's get back to the education piece, guys. We're here to educate. I'm sorry for taking us off track there. The term sticking out a paw. Rick, you ever stick out a paw during Plebe Summer? Ah, there it is.
Sir!
There it is.
Yes.
Stick that paw out.
Stick that paw out.
That was, again, this is one that's just like anytime a detailer's asking something, right? They'll say, stick out a paw if you X, Y, or Z, right? And it's just a form of accountability. It's like saying yes, right? Like, yes. But also, if you need to speak, like you don't rate speaking as a plebe, right? Like you don't just get to speak. That's not allowed. You don't rate it, which we'll talk.
What do you mean don't rate? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the term rate, you're going to hear in 2 forms during Plebe Summer. There are actual rates, which are like things that you have to know, memorize, or have some form of general knowledge about. Like you can get rated, right, on your rates. So rate can be a verb of like, to get rated means to get asked questions about things you're supposed to know. And most of those rates come from the Reef Points book. Right. So I'm using the word rate in about 7 different contexts in the same sentence. So bear with me. Rates, noun, are the actual things you need to know. To get rated is like to be asked questions about rates you should know. And then the term rate, you don't rate that, means like you don't have permission. When you rate something, it means you actually have the privilege of doing that thing. So when you're a plebe, you don't rate, you don't have the privilege, you're not allowed to just speak out of turn. Like you just don't get to do it. You only speak if spoken to, if that makes sense. It's like the movie quote, don't speak it, don't open your mouth, don't talk to me, like don't speak in, I don't even know, I'm messing this up right now. But the point is, you don't get to speak, right? Like that's it. You don't get to proactively speak. And so if you stick out a paw, back to stick out a paw here, if you stick out a paw, that is your like notification to a detailer, like, I need to say something, right? I need to say something. And the most common thing normally asked when sticking out a paw is, sir, Midshipman 4th Class Premier respectfully requests to make a head call. Is especially when you have about the bladder of a 4-year-old, which I do, and the amount of water you drink during Plebe Summer. That was about every 45 minutes. Troy, you mind giving us a rundown on what a head call is?
Yep. So head call in the military, in the Navy in particular, we call the commodes head. And anytime you have to use the restroom, go to the bathroom, particularly number 1, you have to go and do a head call because you have to ask permission to leave formation or leave the group as a whole. So you got to make sure you ask for a head call and get permission during Plebe Summer. Otherwise, you don't rate it.
Yeah, you don't rate it. And the best part about it is you don't get to go alone. You don't get no privacy. Because, Rick, why? Why don't we go anywhere without anyone else during Plebe Summer or Plebe Year for that matter, really?
Oh boy, I mean, you never leave a shipmate alone or behind. It's ultimate accountability.
Never
right?
face down in a rice paddy. Can't leave them face down in a rice paddy, right? Can't leave them face down in a rice paddy.
Lance Corporal Rother, was that a lesson beaten in your head? I just remember that was everything was Lance Corporal Rother. Like you keep somebody out of sight, they're lost to the wolves.
Yep.
Straight up. And so you have a battle buddy. You're gonna hear this term. You have a battle buddy. Everywhere you go, you have to have a battle buddy because you're not gonna get left alone. You're not gonna be face down, right? Like you got to go and you have to have a battle buddy. And so that was my personal favorite. It's like I just prayed that someone had to pee faster than I did. You know what I mean? Because like if someone else had to stick out their paw and say, "Sir, respectfully request to make a head call," you could just be like, "Oh,
I'll be the
I'll
buddy.
go." yeah, no, I'll go with you, dude. Yeah, no, for sure.
My grandfather he was an Army guy, but he told me about sticking a paw out. He actually had some counterintuitive advice in saying that you shouldn't always immediately put your paw out, because in the Navy, Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself. And I just remember at times people be like, "Who wants to go to a picnic?" And and then it's like, "Okay, we'll go pick up that trash for 2 hours, and there's a cupcake afterwards." And so like, I remember sticking out a paw. There was always a little bit of hesitation before I put that out or volunteered for anything.
Oh yeah, 100%. And along with just a head call, I don't know if your detailers made you do this, but we would wait for people to get back from whatever head call before we moved on to the next evolution. So if it was going to take a longer time period than what one would normally assume for a trip to the restroom, you would have to respectfully request permission to make an extended head call. And there's nothing quite like announcing to everyone in that hallway that you got to take a deuce.
Everybody.
You just stick out that paw.
Boy.
You have to have the courage that the detailer's going to come over there and ask you a question and then ask permission to go take an extended head call.
And that's where the bearing comes into play too, because especially if somebody is a repeat offender, like you're like, okay, we know exactly what that midshipman 4 class is doing, and that bearing, because you're just thinking about them going to these extended head calls. Like, goodness gracious.
Yeah, and we talk about Rick singing "Waiting on My Classmates, Sir." There's nothing worse than sitting just being.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure too.
Hey,
man,
being on the stall and just hearing the chants from your classmates, "Waiting on my classmates, sir."
That'll put some pressure on you.
Life is a plebes tough, man. Life is a plebes tough.
That'll put some pressure on you.
Put some pressure on you. All right. Moving on. We talked about reef points, which is good. We talked about rates, which is good. We talked about head calls. All right. Rick, we used the term in the last one of sound off. But now I want to put it in the context of like, if you're just not talking loud enough. Because the term sound off can mean like, hey, when you say sound off, it's like, hey, you're actually saying, "Sir, go Navy, sir." But it can also just mean like, you need to be louder. Right. And so you mind giving us a rundown of the term sound off and then lock it up was kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah. So sound off was usually the one thing that is actually pretty good lesson, but in the Navy and Marine Corps, they really do teach you to project your voice. And so, really learning to sound off and really make that noise and that motivated yelling and screaming like at a guttural level. And I think you have to do that or your voice wears out. And so sounding off was just getting you in the habit of projecting your voice, or just torturing you and screwing with you. Sometimes you would yell as loud as you could and they'd say sound off again, just to make you scream all the more louder. And then on the flip side of that is lock it up. If you're smoking and joking as a plebe, or you're not locked up, you're not locked up. If you don't have that bearing, you're looking around, or you're sitting at a group of plebes is sitting at a meal, and maybe a detailer goes away and they're talking a little bit. You lock it up, and then everybody just has to kind of like get that eyes of the boat bearing sort of thing.
Get that bearing back, yeah.
So it is literally polar opposites: lock it up, sound off, kind of the different poles.
Yep. No, 100%. That's
a quick recommendation.
That's always a good one. Oh, Troy, what you got? Yeah.
Quick recommendation, because Rick hit it on losing your voice. I mean, you were, especially those first couple of weeks, you're yelling at the top of your lungs so much. One, he talked about that guttural yell, but also like when you're at Chow, that bearing bear, take some of that honey, do a spoonful of honey, and like before you start to feel like you're losing your voice, just take a spoonful of honey. It'll keep you in the fight. I don't know why it works, but it works.
That bearing bear is coming to save you. You got that honey on you at all times. Keeping that thing on.
That's good advice.
All right. Now moving to probably a favorite topic here is this term Chow Call. You learn how to do it during Plebe Summer. Let's talk a little bit about Chow Calls. Troy, start us off if you got it a little bit about what a Chow Call is. And then, again, any stories of Chow Calls, man. Chow Calls is a staple in the plebe experience.
It's a big part. So chow calls are one of the first things that you learn how to do. Highly recommend if you can like practice doing them before you ever go to Plebe Summer, because like the cadence of it is so fast. Like, so you now have 12 minutes until new information. New information goes in, and so you go through where the formation is. What is the thing you're doing? What is the uniform? What is the meal that you're going to be doing? What special events are going on that day? Who is the midshipman officer to watch? Different people who are there, and you do them at different times. And each of those times are not just a reminder for you as a plebe of the information that you're reciting, but once you get to the academic year, it's also a reminder for all of the upperclassmen that, hey, noon meal or whatever meal is happening is about to happen right now. It's a wake up call oftentimes. So you're going to get told to sound off, and you're never going to get told to lock it up when you're doing your chow call, because that is literally an alarm clock for the entire Bancroft Hall. But that information is critical. And you guys can, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but the stories of chow calls. So once you're in a squad, you have, one little silver block that you all sit on, and you've got 4 people.
The deck plate, baby.
Yep, the deck plate.
Yep.
And you've got 4 people backs turned to each other, or maybe 2, depending on how many are available for the formation in the academic year. And they're doing that chow call at the top of their voice. And you get really close to those individuals who you share that deck plate with, because you have to. Because if you don't sound off, you're getting attention.
Yeah, I remember them being very like they were. I agree with Troy. They're definitely an alarm for sure. In fact, during the academic year, the 5-minute chow call was my room's alarm clock to get out of bed and get dressed and scramble to formation at the last minute.
Yep.
But I remember as a plebe, the chow call was every bit performative as it was alarm clock, in that it was often used as a venue for a plebe to perform and mess up. And I remember there were certain upperclassmen whom I won't name, and every company has a couple, that the chow call is a gauntlet. And I just remember as a plebe summer, I think we did the chow calls as a group to learn it and kind of be together.
Yep.
But then in the academic year, you do them individually. And I remember there'd be like 5 or 6 throughout the hall, and there'd be like certain chow calls that were outside like the tough upperclassmen's room, and they would live for coming out of there and torturing plebes and yelling at them and snapping in their face. And you get the clapping, or you get the in the face, or the snap, or the trying to get something in your ear. But I hated chow calls. I hated chow calls.
Chow calls are actively the worst. Chow calls are actively the worst. And it was always tough because, like, again, you're supposed to know like a million things during plebe summer. And I think this is like the frustrating part of the plebe experience. Cause like, all right, you just messed up. You're supposed to know rates X, Y, and Z and all these different things and all these things that are of a higher importance. And so you're trying to study those and trying to learn those, but you need to know what the menu is for dinner on that day. And a lot of times the detailers say, you need to know the menu for the next 3 days in advance. So you're trying to memorize the menu of all the food that you're about to eat. And so you're thinking about the menu for lunch tomorrow when you're being asked about dinner tonight, and like your brain's like fried. And so you're doing these chow calls, right? And your number one advantage was just trying to yell as fast as you could so they couldn't even understand what the heck you were saying. And you generally had a good idea, right? Like if you know it's hamburgers, like you can make up the rest, right? You'd be like, all right, if there's hamburgers, like we got lettuce, tomato, onion, buns, blah, 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 ketchup, mustard, like all the stuff. And you just start rattling it off. 1%, 2% chocolate milk, you know what I mean? Like all the stuff. You just start going, dude. You start making the muscle memory of saying like all the accoutrements, all the accessories of your meal, and you just go through it, right? And you just yell as fast as you can. And half the time they're like, I don't even think I know what you said, but like, all right. And normally, right, chow calls, especially during the academic year, usually they'll be on increments. Like you'll do it at the 15-minute mark, at the 10-minute mark, at the 5-minute mark. As a punishment, and normally the standard operating procedure during plebe summer is that you'll do what we call all calls.
All calls. Yeah.
So this term all calls, Troy, you mind talking about what all calls is?
Those all calls is like you're essentially doing it in perpetuity. Like you're continuously providing chow calls minute by minute as you finish them.
Yep.
So you get no respite. There's no break. And it's one a punishment / rehab, because you're not doing the 5-minute chow calls in an adequate fashion. And the expectation is that if you can't do them right the first time, you're going to continue to do it until you memorize every single aspect.
That's right. And again, this is tough because it takes a good 40 seconds to actually like run through from the top to the bottom of everything you're supposed to say. And you're just yelling, right? And so you're there. And again, when it's on 5-minute increments, you're like, sir, you have 15 minutes until new meal formation. New meal formation goes in T Corp, blah, blah, blah. And you run through it. And it's fine. And you can rest for the next 4 minutes and talk about stuff. Those all calls are brutal because you're just yelling, sir, you have 15 minutes to new meal formation, blah, blah, blah. You finish and you're like, all right, well, I got to go in 10 seconds. You're staring at that clock and you're like, oh my God, here we go. And then it's, sir, you have 14 minutes until. And so you're just basically yelling for 15 minutes straight. So we talk about losing your voice and sounding off. Like that stuff happens so fast.
Oh yeah.
So fast because you're just like yelling so much, right? I think, that's half the reason you get the plebe hack, dude. It's just like people get sick all the time. You're just losing your voice. You're screaming. There's germs everywhere.
You're coughing. It gets bad.
It gets bad.
Oh,
so there's this term plebe hack. This is, I think, how we're going to wrap up this episode before we kind of jump into potentially maybe some more gray space terms in the next one and things that are going on. But the term plebe hack, plebes get sick. Plebes, like when you cram all 1,200 people plus 300 detailers, 1,500 people in this tiny space, and people are sweating and gross and all over each other. Plebes get sick, and it's a classic like just upper chest infection, a little respiratory infection. You got plebes coughing all the time, and detailers yelling at you about keeping your bearing, but you can't because you're coughing up a lung, and you're just like, oh, it's chaos. It's pure chaos.
It's bad. It's bad. In between that and the double dragon, I mean, you never know what you're going to
get. Hey, we'll save people from the double dragon.
That'll be another episode.
All right. Well, for everyone listening, I hope you got a little bit out of this episode, just some terminology, some fun stories. We're going to follow it up with a part 3 and keep going through Plebe Summer terminology to hope to keep you in the loop about things that are going on and help you speak the Naval Academy lingo. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll see you again in the future.
Stay motivated.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Academy Insider Podcast. I really hope you liked it, enjoyed it, and learned something during this time. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe or leave a comment about the episode. We really appreciate to hear your feedback about everything and continue to make Academy Insider an amazing service that guides, serves, and supports midshipmen, future midshipmen, and their families. Thank you.